Hi, I'm Beck, I love books, and today I would like to talk to you about the duplicitous nature of the Dramione rush in publishing. It is no secret that there are three major Dramione books or books from Dramione writers that are being published this year by major publishers. The upcoming books are Alchemized by Sen Yu, Rose in Chains by Julie Soto, and The Irresistible Urge to Fall for Your Enemy by Bridget Knightley. The third book there is a completely new story, I believe. I don't think it is actually a Dramione book, but it is based on a similar ship, and the writer did get their way forward by writing Dramione. In this video, I will be discussing Harry Potter and J.K. Rowling, and there will be some names from Harry Potter that are discussed. If you think that even though I'm discussing these in a negative light, that will be too much for you, then I absolutely understand, and please give this one a miss. If you don't know what Dramione is, it's a subsection of fan fiction created majorly, I think, probably as a response to the Harry Potter films, where Tom Felton had a slight redemption arc. And basically, it's about a romance between Draco Malfoy and Hermione Granger. In a time when the majority of people, that I know anyway, even those who have remained ambivalent to J.K. Rowling, are very much in agreement that consumption of her creations is now actively causing and funding harm, especially to trans people. Why are the majority of people not asking more questions about this publishing Dramione rush? Let me know what your thoughts are. I'm going to tell you how I see things, but the world is much, much more diverse than just my perspective. I would like to know if you are going to read these books and why. And I don't mean that in a judgmental way. I would like to know how you see this. I'm not here to tell you what you should or should not do, but I really believe there are some questions you should be asking, especially if you call yourself an ally. So the first question I think that you should be asking is just generally about Dramione. Is the ship too problematic to actually be produced widely, to be published widely? I understand the appeal to a certain extent of a huge redemption arc, of someone being horrendous but not to one person. I've read my fair share of enemies to lovers and dark romance, but there's a difference to me between taking pleasure in a dark romance or an enemies to lovers or something similar and destigmatizing people's likes and desires. There's a difference between that and promoting mistreatment, and in a couple of these books cases, slavery and things like that, entrapment. These books are not exclusive to this. There have been lots of books published recently by big publishers that have also dealt with these themes, but it's certainly a mainstream publisher's choice to pick these up that I do question. I do question it. Also, in the case of Draco, he is literally a supremacist. He's a blood purist. He uses racist slurs towards Hermione. What is sexy about that? We all know what time in history the sort of the Death Eaters and the Harry Potter books are based on, right? What about that do we find romantic? So initially, just before we even talk about the Dramione publishing, you like what you like and that's fine, but the fundamental nature of where this comes from, the source material, it's a bit weird to me, a bit icky. But the first thing about this Dramione rush that I think you should really be asking yourself is the timing of this not just a little bit bizarre? You'll be no stranger to the fact that there's been a recent US re-election, and there's hugely increasing levels of safety concerns for trans individuals worldwide over the past couple of years, but it's really come to a head in the past year. And obviously, we'll go into a little bit later what's happened in the UK recently. The idea that we need to do more to protect and uplift trans people is front and foremost of most discourse that I take part in anyway. However, it is now, after J.K. Rowling has funded her anti-trans charity, after trans individuals have had their identities changed in the UK anyway, permanently, after all of this politics went increasingly radical, that these books have all at once been picked up and published in mainstream. And I'm not saying these books have just been picked up since the Supreme Court ruling here, which again I'll talk about in a minute. But the politics have been going that way, especially in America, for a couple of years. It has been quite turbulent times. And I just feel like the timing of this is just a little bit icky. Why now? It is highly concerning to me. Illumicrate also announced that they were doing a special edition of Rose in Chains on the same day that the UK Supreme Court made a ruling on the legal definition of a woman and excluding trans women from that. And that was funded in large part by J.K. Rowling. She celebrated the ruling with like lots of transphobic tweets. I'm sure you have seen absolutely heinous behaviour. But Illumicrate announced the same day. Now, maybe they had this scheduled, maybe they didn't know that this was going to be a ruling that happened, but it was certainly a choice not to take the post down, or not to be like, actually, there is a huge court ruling today, maybe we shouldn't do it. Like, just to leave that hanging and to double whammy hurt the trans community on that day. The timing is just something that you really, I think, should be asking yourself about. That leads neatly on to my next question, which is, does the falsity of publishers and sellers, does that bother you? And it might not bother you, which is why I think this is an important dialogue to have, but does it bother you? I think probably the major issue here is that publishers and also some sellers, they can't seem to make up their minds. If they want to tap into the market, they're using terms like Dramione in their marketing. There've even been documents published and released stating, what is Dramione? You know, I'm sure you've seen the pink graphic. I'll see if I can pop it up on screen. That was released when some of these books ended up on Edelweiss, which is the sort of precursor to NetGalley. There is no way that you can say that these books have not been publicised as being Dramione. The fan art almost exactly matches the idea that readers have of Dramione. However, when conscious fans, invaders of J.K. Rowling, and in some cases the writers themselves, because the writers themselves have not been completely silent about this, not all of them anyway, when they've raised concerns about their books being touted as Dramione, the publishers are not associating them with JKR. The publishers are like, oh no, it's not, we're not associating with that. So you are when it matches the market, but you're not when it matches morality. So you're walking the line between promoting and dissociating, but actually choosing nothing. Like, does that falsity not bother anyone else? I'm also going to focus a little bit on Illumicrate for my seller argument and example here. Illumicrate have a policy stemming from 2020, a no Harry Potter policy, in terms of items, books, etc., to support the members of the trans community who buy Illumicrate every month. Yet they are widely promoting that they are doing special editions of one of these Dramione books, a couple of them, one of these Dramione books in particular. If the people leading from the top are showing that there isn't any association as far as they're concerned, when the trans community and those fighting for them are stating differently, what sort of chance does a standard reader really have if the people leading from the top are not leading in the right direction? Illumicrate is particularly disappointing because they focus so much on diversity in the books and in their choices, but this is just so tone deaf and exclusionary. That's how I feel anyway. Another question I think you should be asking yourselves is, are you keeping these Harry Potter books alive for another generation by reading this fan fiction? So writing books that is based on source material is not a new thing. Especially if it's on source material from someone who is so damaging and heinous. It keeps the original work alive. Future generations of readers who maybe haven't even read Harry Potter in the first place will maybe go back and find the root of the ship. Think about how many people get their introduction to Greek mythology through a retelling, for example. They might want to look at the original work to see what Easter eggs they've missed. There might be little references to characters and somebody will be like, oh, this is it like in book 4. People will still have JKR on the mind. People will go back and read the series who haven't discovered the series before if these books are published and broadcast in the way that they are being. You're keeping these books alive for another generation, and that is not a good thing. We do not want to be funding this hatred. Another thing that I think that you should consider is, how do you feel about the blind eye that is being shown by some romantasy readers around this? I've got some quotes from some people that I have seen that I would like to talk about. So one thing that I've seen quite a lot is J.K. Rowling doesn't really like fan fiction. So really, we're sticking the finger up to her by reading it. You really aren't. You're keeping her stories alive. Part of the appeal of these stories is that they have Easter eggs in them and it links back to the original series. I also see lots of people saying, well, I can separate the art from the artist. She herself has said when people are support her work, she sees them as supporting her ideals. So if she can't separate the art from her, how can you separate the art from her? If she sees your support as backing up the things that she believes, are you comfortable with that? Because I'm not sure that I would be, to be honest. Another thing that I hear quite a lot is, oh, but they've rewritten the original story and taken out the names and the obvious details, so it's okay. If that is the case, why are the covers designed with Dramione in mind? Why are they essentially cartoon versions of the movie characters? Why are the publishers still promoting it as Dramione? This applies to 2 out of the 3. I think that one is actually a genuine new right, but there was still Dramione used in publication and sort of promotion for that book as well. Another thing that I have seen quite a lot is it's a way that we can enjoy what we grew up with without actually supporting her. And I'll come back to this a little bit later, but you are keeping her legacy alive, like I've said. But what happens if she sues? What happens if she gets the money that a portion of the royalties that the writers have made on this? Why would you even still want to enjoy a franchise also that has now caused so much harm? If you want to read them still, then read them, absolutely. But don't pretend it's like an act of protest to make yourself feel better about it. Because actually, it's not. If you just want to read them, that's great. But don't pretend it's something that it isn't. Another thing that I think you should be asking yourself is, do you see a problem with the performative activism by writers or publishers? All 3, I believe now, writers, they have a link on their social media to fundraisers promoting protecting trans rights, which is fantastic. They obviously have been listening to some of the discourse around this, but just popping a link there and not saying anything at all is performative activism. And this is where things get a little bit woolly, because some of the writers, one of the writers in particular, gets quite frustrated when their work is compared to Dramione because it is a rewrite. But they also, before they realised the backlash would be so great, they also used those terms themselves to describe the book. I think that sometimes it can be difficult because they'll be in contracts with publishers, and publishers will not allow them to say things about perhaps against JKR, or I know that it will be very, very difficult situations to be in, perhaps. Maybe somebody who knows more about publishing could help me with that. But just shoving the link there, you either say something or you don't. It's like this half in, half out thing. You're either, this is not what I agree with, or it is. The link's there. Your speech isn't. It's just not quite enough for me. Also, this is a bigger problem for me. The publishers and the companies, especially Illumicrate's silence. That's such a big issue for me. They're even doing a fundraiser just now for an LGBT community fundraiser. They do it every year, and they usually have a Pride Month sale as well, where any queer books are discounted on the website. So you're either inclusive and diverse, or you promote things that are damaging and you're exclusionary. You can't just act performatively and not expect people to be upset. You set yourself ideals, and so you have to stick to them. Like, does nobody else have an issue with all of this? I think the last thing that we have to consider is the sticky wicket of fanfic publishing in general. If you are well known for fanfiction, if your works are definitely based on existing works, the whole point of fanfiction is it isn't supposed to be published. That's why you're allowed a little bit of leeway with what you use. It's not supposed to be published. So things are obviously changed so these stories can be published, but you do still stand a chance of being taken to a court for a proportion of your profits. I think that is the ultimate kicker. If you think that this is nonsense, you've justified it to yourself as you're not directly funding J.K. Rowling, everything is going to be okay. What happens if one day they tighten up on intellectual property rights? which is happening more and more in the advent of AI. They are doing this. So what happens if it turns out one of these writers does have to give some of their profits to JKR? What if the publishing house that is taking the book on's lawyers did miss something? What if they do have to give a portion of their profits to her because intellectual property right laws change, which they are transitioning at the moment anyway? And then you've bought these books and then you've read them, and it turns out you have funded a really damaging organisation that has changed the identities of trans people, especially in the UK, for a long time. Would you be okay with that? And if you would be, you can live with that however you want. But I think you just really have to think about all of these things. I think people, ultimately, good people, are choosing to self-serving consumerism, I don't know how else to say it, over promoting inclusivity and safe spaces. Yeah, so that's mostly what I have to say about this. But how do you feel about it? Will you be reading them? I think it is much, much better to just say, I'll be reading them, than to try and justify a reason that you think it's okay to read them. But I still would like to know if you think I'm out of line with this. Obviously, we can have differing opinions. It is okay. But I don't think that it is ever okay to directly damage an already marginalised group of individuals. I see this as feeding that damage, but you may not, so let me know what you think. Maybe even the fact that there is a big conversation about this, maybe that is good news, and maybe that is good enough news for you. Bit of a serious video this week, but I hope you enjoyed it all the same. If you stuck around to the end, please consider subscribing, and thank you so much for watching. Bye!